Hello and welcome to my second blog post. This is an embarrassing one. It is about shattering illusions, and you might wonder why I would expose such an embarrassing story. But if nobody exposes their embarrassing moments, then people feel more ashamed of themselves, and shame is very destructive. So, in the interest of reducing shame everywhere, I am going to tell the story of shattering illusions. I understand how intrusive and confusing the boundaries between the internet and real life can be. After I created a public internet persona on Quora, a man tracked down my mother's address and sent me a package with his writings. This didn't bother me because I don't live with my mother, but I'm sure it would have bothered me if he had mailed things to my home or told me that he was spending the day down the street from my home. He didn't do that, of course. So I'm sympathetic with the feelings that drive this sort of behavior, though. When you only know a person's internet persona, you have to fill in a lot of blanks and build up illusions to sort of flesh them out. Quite recently, I found myself selfishly attempting to break down some of my illusions by asking to meet a particular internet persona in real life. I had been invited to go on a tourist trip that I really didn't want to go on, but my daughter had insisted, and I ended up in a big, noisy city for 5 days. I thought, maybe I can make lemonade out of lemons and meet someone with whom I've only ever spoken on the internet. That sounded like a fun, serendipitous opportunity to bridge the gap between the online realm and the real world. What could be wrong with that? A lot. Instead of making a new friend, my trip outside of my comfort zone made me kind of loony, and I think I scared my internet acquaintance away by stepping over the boundaries of the professional, the personal, and the political all at once. Yay me. When I first saw this person on the internet, I decided that he seemed like someone who might have a day job as a character actor, because he had that kind of charismatic performer vibe, and his claimed occupation didn't sound like it could be profitable. So I thought he must have a day job and a totally different alter ego, and I was really curious about what that could be. So curiosity was my driving force, and if the profile I'd invented for him wasn't accurate, I came up with all kinds of crazy ideas for what he might be. Maybe he worked in a yoga studio, which was a front for a personal trainer / prostitution operation in which he did the taxes and money laundering for a group of attractive women. This is how my fiction generation mechanism works. This is how I write novels and stories. I just make up things about people. And I base these things on no evidence whatsoever. But I guess I invented this story for him in particular based on my belief that big cities are dens of iniquity, and unless he was secretly in a more profitable occupation, I assumed that the only way to survive in the city was through vice. So, it's crazy to make up stories about people you've never met before, but a lot of people do it because it's entertaining, and I knew that none of this was true. I still thought it would be fun to shatter this illusion that I'd created with a face-to-face meeting. My first major mistake was in calling his business line and leaving the following message. Hi, it's Kirsten. I wrote to you about how I was going to be in your city, and as it so happens, I am on your street right now with my fellow travelers. It was a big, crowded tourist street, so it wasn't like in the middle of nowhere. They are eating French fries, and I can be reached at this number. I'd love to hear from you. Not too bad, but this is what I said. I got no response, and I should have left it at that. But the noise of the city was wearing on me, and the other adult I was traveling with was giving me the silent treatment over something ridiculous. While her behavior could have been attributed to illness, it was still very difficult to deal with, so I made my second major mistake. I wrote to him via text message, "My traveling companion is nuts and just ditched me, so I'm going to spend the rest of the day in the park at the end of the street." So I wanted to write, "Please call me," but I didn't. I had a sense that I'd already overstepped some boundary by making myself sound like a damsel in distress, but I stupidly hadn't given up hope that he would call and satisfy my curiosity about his true identity. In real life, I knew I wasn't allowed to focus on men who are not my husband, but on the internet, ogling or Googling strangers is a perfectly normal behavior. What I had not anticipated was how quickly an attempt to enter the gray area between these two worlds would turn me into such a weirdo. By leaving my home and my patterns of internet connectivity, I was confronted by real-world disconnection and real-world rules of propriety. In the gray area, I wasn't sure which rules I should be following. When people lack self-awareness, as I did in that moment, they are often overwhelmed and in a state of crisis, even if they are not fully aware of this. I think that before I left on my tourist trip, I was already in a mild state of crisis because my cranky family habitually blames me for their crankiness. But escaping that bubble-like environment and immersing myself in this sea of city noise, it made my crisis worse. To my internet acquaintance, I posed a crisis of another kind, an invasion of his bubble-like personal space. He wasn't famous or anything, but he didn't know who I was other than from the internet, where we'd only spoken, It wasn't a really meaningful, a real relationship. It was just internet world. So when I got no response from him, instead of retreating to a peaceful place to think and regain my bearings amid the horrible, horrible city noise, I tried to salve my shame over having totally missed the mark on where I fit in the world. On the internet, I knew where I fit, but in the real world of this foreign city, I didn't have a clue. I was nothing more than a lost housewife who needed to return home before she got into trouble. Determined to craft a greater purpose for myself than housewife reality suggested, I decided that this beehive of a city demanded an offering, a contribution to the buzz of city life. If I could feed the hive a story that no one else could tell, then I would regain the value I had lost by behaving in such an unseemly, distressed manner. Conveniently, I decided that my internet acquaintance was the person to whom I should leave this offering. This would surely distract from the stupid impression I had given and restore my dignity. Problem, solution, insanity. Dear Mr. X, I think I've discovered the true purpose of my visit. I need to give someone a message about a very important matter, and my hope is that you would know to whom it should be given. You seem like the sort of person who would know the sort of person required. Of course, this isn't exactly what I wrote, but it's sort of what I wrote. It was more specific. It was at this point that he asked me not to contact him again. I can't say that I blame him. In short, I've learned that cities are not my thing, and that asking internet acquaintances to shatter my illusions is a terrible idea. In telling this story, I look like I have a very weak grasp on sanity, but anyone who visits a foreign city can fall victim to this sort of confusion, I think. And it is my hope that by telling my story, it will help someone in a similar predicament. Everyone is vulnerable to flights of fancy, and while they may be funny in retrospect, as they play out, they just look like psychosis. A condition that tends to cause friends to disconnect when the cure is connection. So this story is rather disjointed and strange, but when I write my novels, I think I put the pieces together in a more sensible fashion, and I invite anyone to take a look at them and tell me what you think, and to look at my blog. Until next time.